What happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends? They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about the Reverend's recent trip to Lithuania as part of the Presbyterian Peacemaking Initiative. Reverend Dahl's group studied the legacies of trauma and war and learned how the country is still struggling with its complicity in the Holocaust.
Adrian, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's so good to see you. Fall is finally here. The temperatures are cooler. Isn't this wonderful?
I can't believe I looked at the thermostat at about 6:30 one morning, and it was in the 50s. And I'm thinking 2 months ago it was about 120 degrees. That is a big swing of temperature.
It's huge.
I don't know.
Huge.
So, but at least one thing's consistent. It is a dry heat, okay?
That's right. It's a dry heat.
Cold. Dry
right?
cold.
That's right. We finally turned the heat on last night at our house.
Same with me.
Yeah, it's like we've got to turn this on. No more saving money. I can't do it. I'm freezing.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, you've been having some adventures, and I'm talking about travel adventures here that I'm a little bit envious because you went to the land of my forebears, if you will, to Lithuania, which I don't know how many people would even be able to point Lithuania on the map. But
and I have to tell you that when I was invited to go, I had to look it up on the map. I knew it was in
Where
Europe.
am I going?
Right?
So tell us a little bit about Lithuania and why you went. Did you go by yourself? Did you go with a group?
I was actually invited to go with a group. It was part of our Presbyterian Peacemaking Initiative, which is through our Presbyterian Mission Agency. And it was a group of 13 of us from this country, 12 Presbyterians, 1 Roman Catholic. And we went there to study the legacies of trauma and war. And the reason for the interest in Lithuania is we have mission partners in Lithuania as a denomination, but also because of the fact that in Lithuania, they still have not fully addressed their, what I would call, complicity in the Jewish Holocaust. And so it's only now that a new generation is beginning to hear the stories of how their parents, their grandparents and great-grandparents participated in this. And then Lithuania also because here they are today, where they are located, the ever-present threat, as you know, when you were in Poland last year, the ever-present threat of an invasion. And so they're living in fear of that. And they have a long history of being occupied.
Well, let me go back to what you said about, the Holocaust and their responsibility. So why would that be of interest? Since I know you, I know it's a personal interest, but why would it be of interest to your group, a group of Presbyterians?
I think in large part because we look at it and we say that until we begin to fully address and acknowledge our part in wrong, that we cannot promote healing. And so it's to work with, we have a school that we work with, LCC International University, which is in Klaipėda, and to see their work, how they're mostly attracting students from war-torn countries, and to help individuals understand that in acknowledging the past, we can move on. But we cannot move on, we cannot heal from the past until we acknowledge our wrong, until we seek forgiveness and we forgive.
So are there a number of Christians in Lithuania?
Interesting. Lithuania is, you would call it today a Christian country, and it would be largely predominantly Roman Catholic.
Yeah, that's what I would have assumed.
And they were of interest, the last country in Europe to declare itself as a Christian nation. And so they don't become a Christian nation until almost the 14th century.
Well, a couple
For
years
that, they're a largely what we would call pagan.
pagan.
Yeah.
Needed to get rid of those Vikings.
Right?
I
Yeah.
don't know if the Vikings were good, but maybe they were.
And so what attracted me to this trip largely was my deep interest in the Jewish history, in fighting anti-Semitism, and to travel to a part of the world where, as you know, Lithuania had a thriving, robust Jewish community, a rich Jewish culture. In fact, Vilnius, the present day capital of Lithuania, was referred to pre-World War II, so the early part of the 20th century. It's referred to as the Jerusalem of Europe. It's a center for Hebrew learning. It's a center for Hebrew schools. It's a center for Jewish culture, rich Jewish culture, and a beautiful population. And for years and years and years, they lived in peace with each other.
So are these Jewish sites tourist attractions now? Is that, or are there Jews who actually use it? Are the synagogues alive? Because a lot of the places I've been to, the Jewish community is decimated. So maybe there's a handful of people, but it's dubbed a historic site, maybe even a UNESCO site.
Right.
And you can go as a tourist and see what was, but there's nothing that is currently there. Do you know?
It's a very good question, and it was very difficult for me because Vilnius itself, before World War II, had more than 100 thriving synagogues. Today, there is only one synagogue that is left standing that was not destroyed, and that is the Choral Synagogue in Vilnius. I had the privilege of making arrangements. You helped to make that arrangement for me through David Kotz, and I was able to have a tour of the Jewish quarter, a private tour, and I was able to get into the Choral Synagogue. But it is not a synagogue that would have regular worship services as you do, because you have such a small Jewish community today.
Well, it's sad. Sometimes, like in Germany, when the Jews started leaving the former Soviet Union, they had to go through Germany to Israel, and some of them just stayed in Germany. So as of now, there are tens of thousands of Jews, ironically, who returned to Germany.
Right.
You would think
Thriving.
that would be the last place. So I visited, several of those sites in years past, and now they have synagogues, they have museums, and they have really very creative ways of acknowledging the Holocaust and what happened. They don't hide from it in Germany. So I think you can hold them up as kind of the gold standard, ironically, because every country has done things that they're not proud of. In America, we're coming to terms with what we did with the Japanese and what we did with the Native Americans or indigenous peoples, I think is what we use now. And
Right.
and it's decades, 100 years, 200 years till a country feels they can come to terms with it and what that looks like.
And I think part of the issue that we have in Lithuania is that the Jewish community around the world is still waiting for that kind of transparency that you've started to see in places like Germany. And so while there's clearly a move to try to become more transparent, to admit their part in the Holocaust, it's a challenge if you're Lithuanian, because in Lithuania, more Jewish people were killed at the hands of citizens than in any other country in World War II. So 95% of the Jewish population in Lithuania is killed during the Holocaust, but it's done at the hand of the Lithuanian citizens.
Wow, that is tragic.
And so they were really forced, many of them, by the Nazis to take part in killing their neighbors. I think that's what was really hard for our group to understand and to try to put yourself in that situation and to see how that inhumanity would come to the surface and that personal struggle to survive, and yet their unwillingness to say, even if it means my death, I will not violate another person's humanity. But
But there's an asterisk to it. You might be willing to say that, but what about the death of your daughter,
exactly.
son,
Yeah.
wife? You may say, take my life, but
Right.
we're not taking yours. We're going to take.
Right.
So I've actually had a different reaction than some rabbis who
Mm,
probably agree with you, which is the fact that there were these righteous Gentiles, as we refer, who did risk the life of their families in order to hide Jews, and we
mhm.
celebrate them and we honor them and we
Yes.
marvel. But on the same level, I mean, it is still a little bit of a moral quandary. You
Hmm.
have a responsibility to your own family as well. And I'm not talking anti-Semitism here. I'm just talking about sheer survival of your own family and what you would do to protect them. And
And
so,
I think if I could interject this, I think this was part of the tension is that Lithuania was this nation that's occupied by Russia. Now it's occupied by the Soviet Union. Now it's occupied by Nazis. And from their narrative, they would tell you they were caught in the middle.
right, exactly.
And
And
so,
then when you look at it historically, you're going to probably get people who say that's a bunch of baloney. You are anti-Semitic and you really didn't care
mm,
about your Jews. And then there'll be others who say, we understand you had no choice. You were caught in the middle. So
right.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Lithuanian history to know what, what the final decision is, whether they were anti-Semitic, because there were countries like Denmark, Norway, um, who protected their Jews, and where Jews were protected by the state, a lot of them could survive. But again, we're looking at it in retrospect. But there were countries like Poland and Germany, and I guess Lithuania and others, Ukraine, who were anti-Semitic and were fine. I'll cooperate with the Nazis. I have no love of
Mhm.
Jews. And that's how it happened. So sad, sad.
And so you have
We're
this
recording
history
this
where,
at the beginning of November, and on the 9th of November, this podcast will probably um, come out after the 9th, but the 9th is Kristallnacht.
mm,
So the anniversary of Kristallnacht, the anniversary of broken glass. So this conversation also has that layer of meaning to it. It's not as observed, perhaps, as Yom HaShoah, which is, April, May, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. But
mm.
many communities will say prayers or have a program for Kristallnacht too. And I personally thank you for going on this trip and even having on your radar that this would be a part of your mission, is to be concerned about the Jewish community and our history and what it means to be part of a process of forgiveness, which again was not necessarily even your branch of Christianity per se that took part, but in the grand umbrella of Christianity, Christians who love Jesus need to find a way back, because if you love Jesus, my understanding is you need to love your fellow human beings, right?
And so then we look at this today and we say, what is the message that we can take home? And I kept asking myself, well, what am I even doing here? And Sandy Akselrad's words were constantly in my mind that I had a ministry of presence. There was really nothing I could do but listen to these stories of, these young generations who are finally able to hear what happened and to hear them trying to sort it out emotionally and mentally. And how were they complicit in this? How are they guilty because of their grandparents and great-grandparents?
When I took that trip to Krakow was kind of untouched. It was not bombed during World War II, so the synagogues are still in great shape, except for the fact that there are no Jews. So the de facto center of Jewish life is the Jewish Community Center in Krakow. This guy's doing a fabulous job, and he's got lots of people participating. But he told me that in the Jewish Studies Department, you can get 200 people studying Judaism. And of that group, maybe 5 are actually Jewish. It's kind of like there's this resurgence of interest in all things Jewish, which is an irony of history. Maybe some of that renaissance will happen in Lithuania. They'll want to know the contributions of the Jews. And we love the fact that you could go on this trip and that you shared it and your reflections on something that I'm sure is life-changing. So again, Adrian, thank you so much for sharing your trip, making us part of your journey. And just as a friend and as someone who's obviously part of the Jewish community, your presence there helps give us strength as well, that other people care about our history and the vow to never let it happen to our people or any people again. That, I think, is at the core of being a person of faith. So, as we always say, if faith matters, it enriches your life. And we're so glad that you are listening to our podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Shalom.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.